Good evening, everybody. So this video is being pre-recorded on November 17th to be posted on December 31st at noon. Today I'm going to be reviewing my top 24 books of 2024. I prepared my list ahead of time because I have been reading books and reviewing books since the beginning of the year, and I feel like I have enough books to get this list out to you guys before the end of the year, as opposed to at the end of December when most other booktubers have to put their videos out. So that way, if you want to read these books too, you have more time to read them. So I first wanted to say that I have been receiving advanced readers copies in my email since the end of the spring through Booksirens, and the top 5 books I wanted to talk about are some of the arcs that I have received. The very first arc I received was Rooted by Emma Golding. This is a pirate romance that takes place in the 1700s, and I just love this book so much. I loved, this book made me think of Pirates of the Caribbean and Will Turner's relationship with Elizabeth Swann. So I went into this book thinking of that, and that's what made me love it. So I do not have a physical copy of this book yet, but I need to find it at my library or find it at the bookstore because I really, really want the physical copy. And this book came out in May, and it's November, so I need to get on finding the physical copy. The next book is Something Dead the Cat Dragged In. This was a murder mystery that is set in, I forget where it's set, but it's about senior citizens who are trying to solve a crime. This book, along with Two Spinsters and a Corpse, which is another thriller book that I read earlier. I read these books I read Something Dead That the Cat Dragged In at the end of September, beginning of October, and then I read Two Spinsters and a Corpse in August. And both of these mysteries kept me on my toes the whole entire time, and I can't wait to eventually read the physical copies of these books either. By the way, all of these arcs I gave 4.5 to 5 stars to. The next 2 arcs I wanted to talk about are Strange Eden and Trained by the Greek. The thing I liked the most, the things that I liked the most about these 2 books is the atmosphere, because they're both set in Greek islands, and that's a place I've never been to, and I really want to go. So I like books that transport me to a certain place, and that's what these 2 books did. Now to books that I have physical copies of. I don't have any of these books in front of me right now, but I will certainly talk about them. The first book I wanted to talk about is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I wanted to talk about this one first and foremost because I just had a book group meeting about it at the beginning of last week at Print Bookstore. Carmen Maria Machado. So this is a memoir where it's called In the Dream House. And it's basically what she pictured her relationship to be like with her first wife. But her relationship with her ended up being abusive. So she uses the dream house as a metaphor and framing device for the abusive relationship with her wife, which was intense. Actually... guys. All right, so one part of this book that I really liked was the part where they're driving to Savannah. Let me find that page for you guys so I can read what I highlighted. Savannah is warm and fragrant. The trees drip with Spanish moss, and the water in the fountains is dyed green for St. Patrick's Day. The Juliet Gordon Low House is a beautiful rambling mansion crowded with antiques. Underneath the Juliet Gordon Low birthplace sign that hangs over the entrance, she eggs you on to increasingly ridiculous poses. You are both giggling when you go inside. The ancient woman staffing it, who are wearing drag queen lipstick and eyeshadow, respond to your excited pronouncements about your love of Girl Scouting with silence. So I just love her descriptions of the haunted house. It's beautiful, and it really sets the atmosphere for the scene. I have never been to Savannah, but my parents have been there, and I really want to go there, especially after reading that one line in this book. Another section in this book that I really liked is Dream House as folklore taxonomy. So I have been reading a lot of fairy tale books, and of course my favorite Disney movie, as you all know, if you have seen my videos where I review fairy tale books, is The Little Mermaid. So this section of the book talks about The Little Mermaid. The Little Mermaid suffers in other ways too. The process of growing legs is as painful as knives slicing open her tail. She dances beautifully because every time she steps, she's in agony. Still, the prince does not pick her. At the end, she considers killing him to save herself, but she chooses to die instead and is carried away by angels. She has, through her suffering, earned a soul. So for those of you who are not familiar with the original fairy tale of The Little Mermaid, the Disney movie definitely makes the ending more palatable for audiences, because in the original fairy tale, as we all know, in the Disney movie, Prince Eric and Ariel get married, and in the sequel movie, Little Mermaid 2: Return to the Sea, they have a daughter named Melody. But basically, in the original Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale of The Little Mermaid, Ariel does not marry Prince Eric. Prince Eric marries somebody else. I'm pretty sure he marries Ursula in her human form as Vanessa, and Ariel basically dies and becomes sea foam. But in this description, it doesn't say she becomes sea foam. It says she is lifted up to the angels. So I just really love Carmen Maria Machado's writing. It's so descriptive and immersive, and I just love it. As I was just saying, I am in the process of doing research to write my own fairy tale. So, the next book I wanted to mention in my top 24 books of 2024 is called After the Forest by Kel Woods. This is a book that is set in the future, and it's basically like what happens if Hansel and Gretel escaped the witch. And that is the whole premise. I really love that story and how creative this author's retelling of what would have happened to Hansel and Gretel is described. It's beautiful writing. It's very immersive. I highly recommend it. The next book I wanted to talk about is Beautiful Boy. For thoughts on this book, please watch my video where I do my substance use disorder TBR, because I talk about the book and the movie A Beautiful Boy in that video. So for the sake of not sounding repetitive, that's why I am linking that video in the description for you guys to watch. The next book is called Never Met a Duke Like You. This is a Regency modernization of the 1990s movie The Parent Trap, where you have two duchesses who are in line to be courted, and their parents are divorced, and they basically switch places to match up their parents, like the twins do in The Parent Trap. So Riley Marie recommended this book to me in one of her videos. I absolutely love it. Did I love the sequel, Don't Want You Like a Best Friend? Wait a minute. Oh, sorry. I'm confusing Don't Want You Like a Best Friend with Never Met a Duke Like You. So Never Met a Duke Like You is by Amelie Howard. And this is also a sapphic romance book that is set during Regency times. Actually, no, it's not sapphic. What I liked about Never Met a Duke Like You is that the main female protagonist in this book is neurodivergent, and disabilities like that were not well known in that time period. That's what I actually really liked also about this clip of Bridgerton that I've seen. I read the first Bridgerton book, and the prince in that book has a stutter, and that disability was not well known during that time period either. So I really liked how both of these authors, Julia Quinn, who wrote the Bridgerton books, and Amelie Howard, who wrote Never Met a Duke Like You, really honed in on disability awareness in Regency romance books. The next book that I wanted to talk about is He Who Became the Sun by K.X. Song. Carrie Can Read recommended this book, and I also talk about it in my substance use disorder TBR video, because it basically focuses on, it's a Disney princess retelling of Mulan that focuses on substance use disorder. The next book I wanted to talk about is The Penelopiad by Margaret Atwood. This book was by the same author that wrote The Handmaid's Tale. It was recommended to me by Jack Edwards. It is an amazing modern retelling of Odysseus by Homer. So if you like mythology retellings like The Song of Achilles or Circe or books by Jennifer Saint, then you will love The Penelopiad. The next book I want to talk about at number 12 is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Another book that is on my substance use disorder TBR, but another serious issue besides substance use disorder that Daisy Jones and the Six focuses on is infertility, and that is handled incredibly well in the book and TV show, as well as substance use. So, Taylor Jenkins Reid just does an amazing job writing historical fiction. She has also written The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Carrie Soto is back. And she's coming out with a new book that is about astronauts next summer, which I can't wait to read. Coming in at number 13 is The Rom-Commers by Catherine Center. Catherine Center is definitely one of my top favorite authors. Other books that I have loved by her are Hello Stranger, How to Walk Away, and Things You Save in a Fire. The Rom-Commers focuses on Emma, who is a screenwriter, and Charlie, who is a scriptwriter for TV shows. I think he's an actor. Anyway, so they don't start off on a right foot right away, but then, like, as their relationship builds up, Charlie ends up being really sweet, and he is an acts of service kind of guy, so he, like, bakes muffins for Emma on her birthday, and he's just really sweet. And he is probably one of my favorite male leads in a Catherine Center book. I also like Maggie's Physical Therapist and How to Walk Away. The next book that I wanted to talk about is Carly Fortune's new release from June. It's called This Summer Will Be Different. What I love about Carly Fortune's books is that they're all set in Canada. Specifically, This Summer Will Be Different is set on Prince Edward Island, where Anne of Green Gables is set, and I'm dying to go there. I'm hoping we can go there for our anniversary next fall. I loved the relationship dynamic between Lucy and I forget the guy's name. But yeah, I haven't read the first book by Carly Fortune, but I have read Meet Me at the Lake, and I actually preferred This Summer Will Be Different over Meet Me at the Lake. I just thought that the female character in Meet Me at the Lake was kind of whiny. Number 15 is Romeo and Juliet. So, Romeo and Juliet is a play by William Shakespeare that I read when I was a teenager. I read it in high school. In ninth grade English class. I reread it this year, and I also read a book that was recommended to me by Carrie Can Read called Fair Rosaline, which is a prequel where it's set before Romeo and Juliet, where Romeo actually dates Juliet's cousin Rosaline, who is in a convent, and it made me rethink how much I like Romeo and Juliet, because this paints not such Fair Rosaline paints Romeo in not such a good light, and actually it makes him kind of a sleazeball. Rosaline and Juliet are the same age, and they're supposed to be like 13 or 14. And for some reason, when I originally read Romeo and Juliet, I thought that Juliet was supposed to be 16. I didn't realize she was 13 until after I read Fair Rosaline. So that makes the relationship between Romeo and Juliet kind of gross. And it also makes Romeo sort of predatory, because he's 17 and Juliet is 13. For some reason, I didn't realize the age difference between the two of them was that great. So I like Romeo and Juliet a little bit less after reading Fair Rosaline. But Fair Rosaline is also a really good book. At number 16 on my top 24 best books of 2024 is A Curious Incident of a Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. One of my TBRs for this year was rereading books I read in school to see if my opinions change. I read this book my freshman year in college for multicultural education class with Phil Huckins, and it's set in England, and it's about a 12-year-old boy named Christopher who is neurodivergent, and his neighbor's dog gets murdered, so he is super focused on trying to solve the mystery. And I just love that whole plot, and I also love the relationship between him and his teacher. I think that's really sweet. It reminds me of the relationship in the Wishing Game between Lucy and Christopher, which is also really sweet. I really like how in this book neurodivergency is represented. And at the end of the book, like, you're left kind of hanging because the book closes with the teacher about to say something to Christopher, but you don't know what exactly she's supposed to be saying to him. So if there were ever to be a sequel to this book, which I'm not sure there will ever be, but if there were to be, I would really like to see how, like, Christopher went on in his schooling and, like, what he studied in college, because he was so hyper fixated on solving the murder of his neighbor's dog that I had a theory that he went to college to study forensics or criminal justice or something, so that would have been cool to see. The next book in this list is A Sorceress Comes to Call. This is T. Kingfisher's new release from the beginning of August. T. Kingfisher has fast become one of my new favorite authors. Since the spring, I have read Sword Heart. I have read A Sorceress Comes to Call. I have read Thornhenge. And next I've also read What Feast at Night, the sequel to What Moves the Dead. And next I'm going to be reading What Moves the Dead, The Hollow Places, and Nettle and Bone. A Sorceress Comes to Call is a retelling of the Goose Girl fairy tale. And going into this book, I did not know anything about this fairy tale, so it was very interesting to be introduced to a new fairy tale and the world of it through this book. And I just love the world building and just learning about a new fairy tale. And I just love T. Kingfisher's writing. It's very engaging, and it loops you in from the very beginning. The next book on my list is A Novel Love Story. This is Ashley Poston's new release from June, and it's a story about a romance author who gets transported into the world of her favorite book. And I thought that concept is very interesting and cool, and the town in this book reminded me so much of Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls. I would probably say that out of the books that I have read by Ashley Poston, A Novel Love Story is probably, let's see, how would I rank them? The Dead Romantics is 3.5 stars. A Novel Love Story is 4.5 stars. And the 7-Year Slip. So, actually, honestly, A Novel Love Story is the highest ranked book out of all of Ashley Poston's books, because A Novel Love Story gets 4.5 stars. The 7-Year Slip got 3.75, and The Dead Romantics actually got between 3.75 and 4. Yeah. And I also read Ashley Poston's YA book, Geekerella, which is like a modern retelling of Cinderella, where Cinderella is really into technology and coding and computers, and I thought that was an interesting way to interpret Cinderella. The next book I wanted to talk about is Something Wild and Wonderful by Anita Kelly. This is the follow-up book to Love and Other Disasters, which she came out with, I believe, in like 2019. So first of all, I read this book for my book club at Print Bookstore. It was our pick for June, and it is a male romance that is set on a hiking trip of the Pacific Northwest Trail that goes from Oregon to Washington State. I'm not much of a hiker, but this book made me really want to go hiking on a Pacific Northwest Trail because I pictured the scenery and I felt like peaceful reading it, because whenever I'm out walking, whether I'm hiking or just walking around my loop around my apartment, I just feel very at peace with nature, and that's what this book made me feel like. And is also left very open to interpretation. If Alexei is neurodivergent, I'm pretty sure he is, but I'm not 100% sure. Like, I'm 50% sure, because I could relate to him in certain ways with certain behaviors that he had, but I wasn't 100% sure if he was meant to be neurodivergent. The next book I wanted to talk about at number 20 on my top 24 list is Anne of Green Gables. This book is by Ellen Montgomery. It's a classic from the early 1900s. It's set in Canada on Prince Edward Island, and I just fell in love with it. I have seen a play of this at the Amato Center in Milford, New Hampshire, back in 2012 when Olivia Vortenberg was in it, and Anne is one of my favorite characters in a book, and she is the character in a classic book that I can most relate to, because she's spunky, she's optimistic, she's a good friend. So, yeah, the next book I wanted to talk about is Emma by Jane Austen. This year got me into reading classics because I've been rewatching Friends, and there have been episodes where they talk about classic books. I've been watching Gilmore Girls for the first time, and Rory is a big reader, and she reads a lot of classics. A book that I actually just finished reading, literally, I finished listening to the audiobook on Friday, is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Kathleen and I gave this book 3.5 stars because we couldn't stand any of the characters except for the older gentleman, Lord Henry. He was good. Like, Dorian and Basil were just annoying. Dorian was really pretentious. The girl that he was in love with, that was the actress who committed suicide, was also really pretentious. Her name was Sybil. So this book was written in, I'm talking about Picture of Dorian Gray still. Picture of Dorian Gray was set in like the 1800s, 1900s, I think. And this book was written at a time when gay relationships were not very well known. Basil, who is the guy who is painting the picture of Dorian Gray, is in love with Dorian. Dorian couldn't care less about him. I don't want to spoil the ending. But all I have to say is that I think I heard somewhere that Oscar Wilde was gay, and he kind of made his characters be self-inserts of him because he was afraid of coming out, because he was afraid of how people would judge him, which makes sense given the time period. If this was like late 1800s, early 1900s. Back to Emma. Emma is about a girl who lives in Regency, England, who plays matchmaker and tries to match up people in her life to varying degrees of success. The various degrees of success. Never Met a Duke Like You by Amelie Howard is a modern retelling of Emma, and also a modern retelling of the 1995 movie Clueless with Alicia Silverstone and Paul Rudd. I gave Emma 3.5 stars. The next book that I wanted to talk about is You Never Know, which is Tom Selleck's memoir. Tom Selleck, as most of you know, if you have been following all of my reviews on Friends, is the one who played Richard, who is Monica's boyfriend in the early seasons, who is also friends with her father, Jack. I will not get into my opinions on Monica and Richard's relationship because I have talked about that before. In his book, Tom Selleck does not really mention Friends very much. He mostly talks about his show Magnum P.I. from the 1980s, which Matt and I have been watching. By the time this video comes out at the end of December, we will have completed watching Magnum P.I. At the current filming of this video, we have watched about 16 episodes of season 4. And I'm enjoying it. I mean, Magnum is probably one of my favorite characters that I have seen in a TV show. Actually, Matt and I ranked all of the TV characters in a tier list from TV shows and movies that Friends actors were in before, during, and after Friends. And Magnum ranks in A tier, Richard ranks in B, and so does Peter Mitchell from his 1987 movie 3 Men and a Baby. We are getting to the end. 2 more left. The next book I wanted to talk about in spot number 23 is Salem Falls by Jodi Picoult. Like Kristen Hanna, Jodi Picoult has fast become one of my favorite authors of this year. In the past, I have read My Sister's Keeper and seen the movie. Back in January, my friends in New Hampshire and I read and discussed 19 Minutes, which is about a school shooting. Salem Falls is another book by her that I just read, and I also recently read Perfect Match. So most of Jodi Picoult's books are really sad. 19 Minutes is definitely really depressing because this is about a school shooting. My Sister's Keeper is about a girl who gives her organs to her sister who has an incurable disease, and it's about like body autonomy. Which, if you have never seen a movie about this that's based on this book with Abigail Breslin, you definitely should. Salem Falls is set in the 2000s, and is set in a fictitious town of Salem Falls, New Hampshire. To preface this review, Jodi Picoult is from New Hampshire, so most of her books are set in New Hampshire. So in the present day chapters of this book, a high school teacher is on trial for sexually assaulting his student and getting her pregnant. And then the past chapters some of the past chapters actually focus on the past life of the main teacher who is on trial for sexually assaulting his student. But what makes this interesting is other POV chapters talk about the Salem witch trials, because this book is set in Salem, New Hampshire. Not Salem, Mass, but this teacher is on trial for sexually assaulting his student, which he claims he didn't do. So he is claiming that he is innocent for sexually assaulting his student and getting her pregnant. And that connects to the Salem witch trials, because obviously the people who were involved in the Salem witch trials were accused of being witches and practicing witchcraft when they may or may not have been witches. If you need more information about the Salem witch trials, a play that you should read that I read when I was in high school, which was required reading for all English classes, was The Crucible by Arthur Miller. And The Crucible is referenced several times throughout the book Salem Falls. So if you want to read Salem Falls, I would recommend you should probably read The Crucible first. And I didn't think about reading The Crucible before I read Salem Falls, but now that I know that there's references to that play in that book, I will be reading that again very soon. So I gave Salem Falls 4 stars, and I also gave Perfect Match 4 stars. 19 Minutes got 3 stars, I believe, if I remember that correctly. And finally, at number 24 is Make the Season Bright. This book is by the same author as the Bright Fall series. It is a female holiday romance between 2 characters named Charlotte and Brighton, and they used to be in a relationship, but they had a falling out and broke up. So basically this is like second chance romance type of thing. I don't want to spoil it in case you want to read it, but I gave it 4 stars, and right now I'm reading it for my book club at Print Bookstore. And I will be giving this book a more thorough review on December 31st in a review that Matt and I do when we do our entertainment wrap-up, because that's when I will be talking about the December books that I read for my book clubs at Print Bookstore. Thank you. Have a good night.